Hello again, this is Mr. Montgomery, and here are some thoughts and notes and comments and suggestions for your informative speech. This content can also be used in developing your upcoming group presentation component that you're responsible for, whatever your topic might be, because it is most likely going to be basically an informative speech. So let's talk about informative speaking. Some of these items that we have already covered last time in looking at the first two chapters on speaking in general. This one just chapter tries to focus in on informative speeches in particular, but a lot of the content dovetails together. So, okay, feedback rubric. I'm 90% sure there is a grading rubric posted in Canvas for you, so you can see how I will be grading the speech. If it's not there now, I will make sure it gets in there really quick. But that way, you kind of know what the target is you are aiming for. So hopefully that will be beneficial. So anyway, that's just a side comment. So the key concepts about informative speaking, understand, and this is in comparison particularly to persuasive speeches. Informative speeches are not trying to change attitudes, opinions, beliefs, behaviors, perspectives. They are just bringing information. Now, sometimes you could say that maybe every informative speech is at some level a persuasive speech, because I'm thinking you picked your topic for a particular reason. I keep talking about the Statue of Liberty. And it may be because you visited the Statue of Liberty, you really loved it, and you think everybody should go to the Statue of Liberty. So even though it is a speech about the statue, the kind of the underlying message is, and you should go, and this speech is going to be loaded with reasons why you should go. There is an underlying persuasive message. But anyway, maybe that's not accurate. I think it is. And also, an informative speech is usually not controversial. Talk about the Statue of Liberty, that's pretty straightforward, or the Grand Canyon, or the Pacific Ocean. Most of those topics are just informative, so we know more about that topic. Okay, so let's look at the components of the speech. Again, you should know these items already. We're going to talk about the introduction, the body with its main points, the conclusion. I don't think it's on the slideshow here, transitions, and those are the components. So in the introduction, here's what you're trying to accomplish. Here are your goals. Number one, you want to grab everybody's attention. You do not want to start by saying, hello, my name is, and my speech is about the Grand Canyon. Don't start that way. It's clear and straight to the point, but it's boring. So talk about something personal. Begin with a personal story of, I remember when I was 5 and we went to the Grand Canyon and my parents almost left me behind by accident. Or was it by accident? But anyway, so something that grabs their attention. Don't start with your name and the topic you're covering. That's just no good. So get our attention. Something that shocks us, surprises us, maybe offends us, gives us something to think about. But I think a personal story is the best way to go. Present a clear topic and thesis. Somewhere in there, you want to say, so you'll talk about the Grand Canyon, the story, how you got left behind, leave us, no pun intended, but leave us with a cliffhanger, and then say, today I want to talk about the Grand Canyon. And I'm going to talk about its, the valley. I'm going to talk about the rim, and I'm going to talk about the mule rides down to the bottom. I think it'd be a great speech right there. But anyway, something that tells us very clearly, make sure your audience knows what you are talking about. Don't assume that. Make sure they know. Third, establish the importance of the topic to the audience. Maybe tell them why you selected that. Maybe it's a speech about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and you're talking about the reason you're talking about it is because you're hoping that somebody might be inspired to do something about it. But give us a clear picture of why you bother to tell us about that item. Also, establish your credibility. Tell your audience why you are the expert, that you can be trusted, that it's worth your time to listen to you. And so say, and I want to hear that word research. In order to prepare for this speech, I did plenty of reading and watched videos and interviewed a Grand Canyon guide in order to, and I did all this research in order that I may be well versed about the Grand Canyon. So we use the word research. It's such a great word. It's clear. It says I've done my homework. And then finally, preview your main points. Tell us what you're going to tell us. And I think we mentioned that last week. You're going to tell us at the beginning. Your speech is your main point, so you're telling us again, and then you're going to wrap it up by reviewing. Tell us what you told us. So you want to accomplish all those items in your introduction. Then your body, which is made up of your main points. So make sure each point is clearly introduced. And we usually do that with the use of transitions. So let me back it up. So I'd say, so today I'm going to tell you 3 things about the Grand Canyon. I'm going to talk about the rim, I'm going to talk about the valley, and I'm going to talk about the donkey excursion on the way down. I don't know if they still do that or not. So now we know where you're going. So the first thing after you preview your points is today. So let's get started by talking about the rim of the Grand Canyon. So very clearly, by using your transition, that is your first main point. And then you could say, according to nationalgeographic.com, the rim of the Grand Canyon covers, I don't know, what is it? I'm guessing 25 miles around. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 10. I don't know. But anyway, so make sure that you move right into it. Then support your point with clear, interesting information. Give us good, solid information that's intriguing. Try to find the balance between being too vague and being too detailed. I'm a detail person, so I don't mind that, but sometimes I get lost in the weeds. So try to find the proper balance. Use good, solid, trustworthy information and cite your sources. A source citation would say, according to Joe Smith in his 2014 article titled, How Big is the Grand Canyon? In National Geographic magazine, he says the Grand Canyon is 25 miles around. I'm sure it's bigger than that. But anyway, notice in that I told you who said it, I told you where they said it, I told you when they said it, and I told you what they said in either in a quote or a paraphrase. Now the when part, most people don't necessarily include this, but you want to tell us when, particularly on topics of science and technology. And there may be other topics as well. But if, for example, if you're giving a speech about solar power and you're referring to a 1978 article, it is probably worthless and meaningless because things are always changing. Math, you could probably get away with a 1958 article and it may not be that different. But technology, science, medicine, computer technology, all that is changing moment by moment. So give us the date. Generate audience involvement. And audience involvement, the way you do it is you ask questions like, how many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? Or have you ever thought about what it would be like to spend the night in the Grand Canyon? So you're involving your audience to think, to do by raising their hand, by shaking their head yes or no, by making them laugh. All those are ways that involve the audience in your speech. And then, as we mentioned before, include effective transitions. Here's where I would go to my second point. So now that we've talked about the rim of the Grand Canyon, let's travel down to the valley of the Grand Canyon. Kind of, nice wording there, I think, maybe. But now I know my audience said, oh, he finished his first point. He's now moving on to his second point. He's done with that. He's starting here. Nobody's going to get lost. Okay. So next, your conclusion. Now, I usually speak in terms of 2 items to do in the transition, but they give you a couple of more. First of all, effective brake light. Make sure everybody knows it's coming in for a landing. And the words, in conclusion. There aren't that many different phrases. In conclusion, to sum things up, we've talked today about this, this, and this, but something that's finally, but something that says very clearly, the end is in sight. Second, review your main point. So today, in conclusion, I've told you about the rim of the Grand Canyon, the base or the valley of the Grand Canyon, and the mule rides you can take to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back up again. So remind the audience of the topic is important. Why did you bother? So friends, we've learned about the Grand Canyon. It's not just a fun vacation place, but it's a vital resource that we always want to take care of. And so the reason for my speech. Okay, that gets it done. And then end powerfully and memorably. So I remember when I almost died in the Grand Canyon because of a snake bite, but I made it out because of those trusty mules. And even though it was very scary, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. There you go. So that leaves them with something, certainly something memorable and well stated as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on to visual aids. If you're going to use visual aids, PowerPoint's the most go-to item we have. We're going to talk about that later. But if you're going to use a visual aid, something to see, something to touch, just a few comments. Number one, make it memorable without being distracting. So talk about your visual aid. If you're going to pass it around, don't pass it around during your speech because they're going to look at that visual aid and not listen to you. And then maybe you need to put it away, even hide it, because people are going to kind of keep looking at it. So memorable without distraction. Second, if you're going to use a video clip, brief and relevant. Sometimes I think people say, okay, I've got to do a 5-minute speech. Okay, if I do a 2.5-minute video clip, I only have to talk for 2.5 minutes. No, in my class, 30-second video clips, one time, maybe two, because I want to hear you as a speaker. I'm not here to watch a video clip. So minuscule use of videos. Wording to talk about your video, your visual aid is clear, simple, easy to see, and make sure, I'm sorry, I'm off track here. Wording in terms of your slides. Make sure they're big enough to see, that it's simple, clear, and don't overload your slide with wording. Really keep it short, because your audience, if it's too much and they're reading it, guess what? They're not listening to you. And then you may need to point out the significance of the visual aid. This is something that I learned the other day, that if you don't point out the significance, are you sure that your audience is making the connection? So make sure they know what your visual aid is about. Okay, then finally I think that's the last thing here. Let me peek ahead. I think this is where I'm going to stop this video after this. Delivery. Here's what I want you to do and or not to do. Number one, don't read to the audience. And 2 ways you're going to not read. Number one is lots and lots and lots and lots of practice. Don't wait too long to get your speech done. Give yourself at least 2 or 3 days to just focus on practicing your speech out loud, standing up in front of an audience of friends or family if possible, and get some feedback. But try to recreate the classroom setting with your speech presentation practicing. Use your computer. If you have a slideshow, PowerPoint, click along with the slideshow, because you want to get used to, I don't know if I call it muscle memory or not, but you want to get used to working with your slideshows. Number 2, make effective eye contact. The other thing I was going to mention, I forgot. Number 1, practice a lot. Number 2, don't take a whole lot of notes up to the lectern with you, because if you do, I can almost guarantee you're going to end up reading it. Less is more. Just a word or a phrase here or there should remind you, not so that you don't read it to us. The only exception is if you have a quote, please read it to us. Now, we're not asking you to memorize a quote, but especially if the wording, if it's a Martin Luther King or someone who just words things so well, don't paraphrase it. Don't memorize it. Just read it well to us. That's the only exception I can think of. Number 3, avoid defluencies. And get rid of all that. I'm an person now. I used to not be. I've become one. I've gotten lazy over the years. Speaker stands and moves naturally. The only way, once again, you're going to be natural is by practice, standing, walking around, No leaning on the lectern and no fidgeting. Again, it's all nervousness. And if you need to, hang on loosely to the lectern with your hands on each side. If you're not sure what to do with your hands, keep your feet on the floor. Don't kick your feet. Don't cross your legs. Just stand firmly. And if you have good posture, take advantage of that. And then finally, make sure you are appropriately dressed. And this would mean one of two things. Number one, either dress as if you were going to a job interview, or number two, dress appropriate to the speech topic. I had somebody do a speech on Star Wars, the Enterprise, the whole thing of how much money it's making over the years, and the person wore a Chewbacca onesie. So it was funny and all that. And so I gave him a good grade for it. But as I thought about it over time, it's like, but they completely emptied their tank in terms of credibility and integrity. Because are you going to take somebody seriously who's wearing a Chewbacca onesie? So I kind of, ponder back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video there, and I will finish it in part two on informative speeches.